Good evening and welcome to the San Bruno City Council special meeting of November the 15th, 2022, 6 p.m. Meeting has been called to order. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Hamilton.
Here.
Councilmember Marty Medina.
Here.
Councilmember Salazar.
Here.
Vice Mayor Mason.
Here.
Mayor Rico Medina.
Here. Thank you all, council present. Item number 3, public comments for items not on the agenda. So if they're not on the agenda, this would be the time and opportunity for you to raise your hand and be recognized. Each member would have up to 3 minutes. It is council policy to refer matters raised in this forum to staff for investigation and or action where appropriate. The Brown Act prohibits the council from discussing or acting upon matters not agendized pursuant to state law. Are there any members in the public or via Zoom?
I do not have any speaker cards and no hands are raised.
Thank you. We'll move on to item number 4, announcements and presentations. First announcement, item A, the regular city council meeting scheduled for November the 22nd, 2022 is canceled. The next regular city council meeting will be held on December the 13th, 2022. Are there any comments or questions from members of the public or Zoom?
No hands are raised.
Item B, town hall meeting scheduled for Tuesday, December 6, 2022 at 6 p.m. Join the meeting to hear more on development and school projects in San Bruno by the City of San Bruno and the San Bruno Parks School District. Are there any members of the public or members that are here present or in Zoom that wish to speak on this item?
No hands are raised.
Next item, item C. Join the City of San Bruno on Thursday, December 1st, 2022 at 5 p.m. at Centennial Plaza on San Mateo Avenue and Jenevein Avenue to usher in the holiday season. Enjoy Santa's arrival on the fire truck and count down the annual lighting of the tree with Santa and City Council members. After the lighting, enjoy hot chocolate, cookies, visit with Santa at 568 San Mateo Avenue, and walk the avenue to see all the decorative windows for the holiday season. Are there any members of the public that are present or those that are on Zoom that wish to speak on this item?
No hands are raised.
Item number 5, consent calendar. We have 2 items. And is there anyone who wants to pull for a separate motion? Any member that wants to have a question or a comment on either of those items? Is there any action from, is there any members of the public that wish to speak on the consent?
Vice Mayor Mason's hand is raised.
Oh, I'm sorry. Vice Mayor?
Just a quick question for 5B.
You got it. Thank you. Seeing none, I will go to 5B. Adopt a resolution waiving the encroachment permit fee, staff labor reimbursement fees, and insurance rider premium costs, and appropriating $636.21 from general funds for a holiday party road closure on Glen Avenue. Vice Mayor.
Yeah, just wondering who the applicant is.
Mr. Mayor, I am bringing Public Works Director Matt Lee into the room. Okay, he should be coming on soon.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. My name is Matt Lee, Public Works Director. I'm going to have to check the name of the applicant and get back to you.
Thank you, Director. Vice Mayor?
That's fine. If you can get back to us during the meeting, that'd be great. I can vote. I'm ready to vote. I just want to know who the applicant is. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Hand up. Who wants to be recognized? City Manager.
Sure, we've just checked here. The applicant is a lady by the name of Kathy Brown.
Great, thank you.
And if I'm not mistaken on these processes, and I guess I can get an acknowledgement, yes or no, but I believe the applicant has to get signatures from everybody that is affected within the closure of that area. So it has to come from not just one, but all on that court. Any other questions or comments on that item? Any members of the public here or through Zoom who wish to speak on any of the item A or B on consent?
No hands are raised.
Thank you. And back to the council, action on consent, please.
Through the chair, I'll make a motion to approve the consent calendar.
I'll second.
Motion Salazar, second Hamilton. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Hamilton,
Aye.
Councilmember Marty Medina,
Aye.
Councilmember Salazar,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Mason,
Aye.
Mayor Rico Medina.
Aye. Item is, consent is approved 5-0. Next, we'll move on to item 6, which are public hearings.
Item 6A, hold public hearing and adopt resolution approving rates for solid waste collection services.
Okay, thank you. This is a public hearing, and this is a time that at the public hearing is to consider changes to the city's solid waste rates. And again, this is a open public hearing as far as this process is going. And it is also important to know that that the notice of the hearing have been given as required by law. And I would ask at this time to staff our city manager, Jenevein Grogan, for a report.
Sure. Good afternoon, Mayor, members of the council, members of the public. As the mayor noted, my name is Jenevein Grogan. As is noted on the slide, though, my name is not Matthew Lee, our Public Works Director, who is running a little late and unable to be here, and so I will pinch hit, but I'm getting in.
He's making his appearance as any good person would.
All right, well, I was going to give the presentation, but if we can wait 2 minutes,
Absolutely.
Matthew will be here.
No problem. And just for members of the public, it is still, again, folks had up until 5 p.m. to submit any written protest to City Hall, to the city clerk's office. Anybody coming present this evening has that opportunity. It has to be in writing, and still during this presentation and time, they have the opportunity to email, which will be monitored during this time until public hearing is closed. So with that, Director of Public Works, Mr. Lee.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. I thank City Manager Grogan for the introduction. I like coming in style. We are here today to discuss the rates hearings. Can you start the presentation, please? The public hearing for rates for solid waste collection services. My name is Matt Lee. I'm the Public Works Director. I'll be doing a portion of the presentation, followed by our Interim Finance Director, Bobby McGee. The objective of the presentation is to hold a public hearing and consider all protests against proposed rates for solid waste collections services. If no majority protests exist, adopt a resolution approving rates for solid waste collection services. The agenda we'll start first with me talking about the background for the solid waste franchise agreements and to date of how we got here, and then I'll pass it off to Interim Finance Director McGee to talk about Proposition 218 and its process, the public hearing notice, the proposed timeline for rates, and then the next steps and tonight's recommendations for actions, and we'll finish up with any questions that you may have. In terms of the franchise agreement itself, there was a franchise agreement that was established previously between the City of San Bruno and Recology on July 1st, 1998, and it was slated to expire on June 30th, 2024. The next rate increase was projected to be 29% in July of 2022 based on the previous agreement. With the direction of council, staff was directed to renegotiate a new franchise agreement, which was accepted on September 27th, which sets the amount and rates for July 1st, 2023, January 1st, 2023, and July 1st, 2024. The new franchise agreement takes effect on January 1st of 2023. It continues with the solid waste collection services that Recology has been traditionally providing the city in the past. It also helps with the billing, record keeping, and billing fees for the solid waste collection services. And it also helps with the SB 1383 compliance requirements that are now required by the state. Some potential additional services that are also part of the agreement is the street sweeping services and the trash capture device cleaning services. These are only potential services. They're not yet currently services that Recology provides, and they are also not in the proposed solid waste rates currently. In early next year, in 2023, the city will meet and confer with the union to discuss these services and how we may be able to incorporate them within the franchise agreement. The proposed rate adjustments for garbage service is a 6.03% increase for residential and a 16.81% for commercial and debris boxes. The new rates again will take effect on January 1st, 2023, when the new franchise agreement takes into effect. The main factors, as we discussed for the rate changes back in September, are the higher than normal inflation rates and then the new service for compliance with the state mandated Senate Bill 1383. Here is a slide of the current rates. As you can see, they have it for multiple gallons. One thing I would like to highlight is there is a 16-gallon cart now as part of our discussions. There are 16-gallon carts available to be provided in January 1st, 2023 if requested by residents. This chart shows generally the rate comparison amongst neighboring cities. As you can see, City of San Bruno is in the middle of the pack in terms of charges by Recology. And here's a historical rate comparison in terms of the percentage increase over time. As you can see, on the far right, that is the rate increase, but I would like to just remind council that with the previous contract, had we not renegotiated a new franchise agreement, it would have been a 29% rate increase. And now I'd like to pass the presentation along to Bobby McGee, our interim finance director.
Thank you, Matt. If you would stay there, I'll need an assist with moving the slides forward. Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. So just to give you a little bit of background on Proposition 218, that was a voter initiative in 1996 that amended the California Constitution, which limits cities' power to simply impose fees for what was quoted as properly related services. That proposition does apply to fees for solid waste collection services, and so the Finance Department assisted by running the 218 process for this particular item tonight. So Prop 218 process includes providing a written notice by mail. There has to be a public hearing that is at least 45 days after the mailed notice happens. At the public hearing, the council should consider all protests against proposed fees or fee increases in this case. If their written protests against the proposed fee are presented by a majority of the owners, then the city cannot impose the fee. So this slide off to the right there, you will see the first page of the notice that was sent to all of the property owners within the city limits, as well as renters, anyone that may have had an interest in this item tonight. Off to the left there, you'll see that the new franchise agreement requires the rate increase to take effect on January 1st, 2023, which was in the notice. And on September 27th, the council directed us to send the notice out. And so on September 30th, after 3 days of furiously working on getting these notices printed, we did mail it out. So next slide, please. And so this is the protest period and timeline to implement the new rates. As I just mentioned, on September 27th, the City Council directed us to send out the notice. On September 30th, we actually got the notices mailed out. And then tonight, the City Council should hold the public hearing, consider any protests that were received, and then ultimately take an action considering the resolution, the recommended resolution that is attached in your packet. And then if that is approved by the council, then on January 1st, 2023, the new rates would take effect. And so the next steps in tonight's recommended actions, so we're recommending that the council hold a public hearing, open the public hearing, receive any public testimony on this item, receive any additional written protests. And at the conclusion of the public hearing, we will count the total amount of protests and make that announcement. If no majority protests exist, then we are recommending that the council adopt a resolution approving the rates for solid waste collection services, which would be effective January 1st, 2023. And so with that, I am available for any questions.
Thank you very much. At this time, I'll turn it back to the City Council to see if there are any questions on the presentation. Questions on the presentation from council? Seeing and hearing none, we will then go ahead at this time and take public testimony. Now is the time for the public testimony. All interested persons may testify for or against the proposed solid waste rates that are here in the audience or via Zoom.
I do not have any speaker cards and no hands are raised.
Thank you. Okay, this is the final call. That this is your opportunity for anyone to speak. Once we close the public hearing will be closed. Last chance.
No hands are raised.
All right, at this time, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing. And since with the closure of the public hearing, I would ask the city clerk the determination of the protests.
Do we need to make a motion to close the public hearing?
I don't believe we do, but would you like to?
After the
Protests, yes.
Yes, the city received protests. The city received 17 written protests against the proposed solid waste rates. The number of written protests do not represent 1/2 or more of the property upon which the solid waste rates are proposed to be imposed.
Okay, made. I would like to ask for a motion and a second to close public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Motion Hamilton, second Salazar to close public hearing. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Hamilton,
Aye.
Councilmember Marty Medina,
Aye.
Councilmember Salazar,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Mason,
Aye.
Mayor Rico Medina.
Aye. That is 5-0 to close the public hearing. Now we'll bring it back to council for any comments, considerations, deliberation, and/or action. Bruno of San Bruno approving rates for solid waste collection services. Is there any action by council?
Through the chair, I'll make a motion to accept item 6A as read by the clerk.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion Hamilton, second Salazar. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Hamilton,
Aye.
Councilmember Marty Medina,
Aye.
Councilmember Salazar,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Mason,
No.
Mayor Rico Medina.
Aye. I have a 4-1 with the vice mayor, a no vote on that item.
Through the mayor, I don't think you
yeah.
could see my hand. I just had a question for staff.
I apologize. Please.
I just want to ask, it was mentioned in Director Lee's conversation that due to this renegotiation, we were able to get a lower price. I just wanted to know in the new negotiation, how do we know what the rate will be so that we can prevent this situation from happening again?
City manager?
Sure. Thank you, Vice Mayor Mason. I think that there are a couple pieces to that question for 23 and 24. Subsequently, like the prior franchise agreement, there are interim rate year adjustments that increase based on indexes, as well as a detailed rate year. I know that this was discussed when we were going through our study sessions on the franchise agreement, and one of the things that I believe the consultant noted is that the basic structure of different indexes, and one of the things that would have resulted in a 29% increase was a combination of high inflation and the fuel index increasing. Going forward, candidly, some of that may still occur if we have very high inflation as well as other indices increase to the. Important to note is that every 3 years, there is a detailed analysis that is based on for those detailed years to be a resetting of the base changes in the market.
Okay, thank you. And not bringing it back to the negotiating table to see if we can get the city in a better position. Thank you.
Thank you. With that concluding item A, we'll move on to item B.
Item 6B, 1, hold public hearing to adopt a resolution making draft findings and declaring an intent to consider overriding San Mateo City County Association of Governments, CCAG, Airport Land Use Commission's, ALUC, determination of inconsistency with respect to noise policies for the draft 2023 to 2031 housing element update, and 2, authorize the city managers to submit the resolution to the Airport Land Use Commission and the State of California Department of Transportation's Division of Aeronautics and schedule a public hearing pursuant to Public Utilities Code Section 21676.
Before we begin, I will be recusing myself from this item to the fact of where my residence and my home are located to the project that is having the determination by the airport land use. So I will hand the meeting over to the Vice Mayor.
Thank you. And since I am physically not present, I'm actually out of town today. I'm going to rely heavily on our city clerk, Lupita Huerta. So without further ado, we can introduce Darcy Smith, Assistant City Manager, to give the presentation.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Honorable Vice Mayor, City Council members. My name is Darcy Smith, Assistant City Manager, and I'll be making this presentation along with Michael Smith, Senior Planner, and the Housing Element Project Manager. He's been doing a huge amount of work on the housing element, and thank you so much for being here tonight and helping with this. I'll just kick it off with quick objective of this item, and then move on to Michael's part, which will cover the background of the Airport Land Use Commission, the housing element, and more specifically, the suitable sites inventory, which is the focus of tonight's discussion. He'll also present the review of the housing element for consistency with the airport land use plan. I'll come back, give you a little bit more of a technical presentation on the local override process, which is again the focus of the item before you tonight for the housing element sites. And then I'll close with tonight's recommended action, and we'll have time for questions. So the objective for this item, it's a mouthful. It's 2 parts. The first part is to hold the public hearing to present you with a resolution that would make draft findings and declare an intent to consider overriding the San Mateo City and County Associations of Governments, or CCAG as we commonly refer to it. And I know you're familiar with that acronym, but we may have new audience members who aren't. The Airport Land Use Commissions, which has another acronym, ALUC, which we'll use tonight, their determination of inconsistency with respect to the noise policies for the housing element update that you'll hear about. If that resolution is adopted, then the second part would be to authorize the city manager to submit that resolution to 2 bodies that have review authority, the Airport Land Use Commission and the State of California Department of Transportation, Caltrans, Division of Aeronautics, and then schedule a public hearing pursuant to Public Utilities Code Section 21676. Much like the item before you, again, this is a 2-step process with a minimum of 45 days between when that notice is given to those agencies and when you can have the public hearing. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Smith to present the background and the housing element overview.
Thank you, Darcy. Good evening, Honorable Vice Mayor, Mason, and members of council, Michael Smith, Planning Department staff. As Darcy said, I will be providing tonight's background for the agenda item to provide insight that has led us to tonight's override consideration. And to get started, we're going to talk a little bit about the Airport Land Use Commission, otherwise known as the ALUC. It is an advisory committee to assist local agencies in ensuring compatible land uses near airports, and in our case, it's SFO. Portions of San Bruno are located within the planning area defined in the Comprehensive Land Use Compatibility Plan for the environs of San Francisco International Airport, otherwise known as the SFO ALUCP. This was adopted by the Board of Directors, known as CCAG, for the city and county, for San Mateo County in 2012. The SFO ALUCP provides land use policies, height limits, and recommendations for development in the areas surrounding SFO to ensure that development in the areas surrounding the airport are compatible with airport operations. There are three main areas of review in the plan. It is the noise compatibility, safety compatibility, and airspace compatibility. And this is regarding the land uses, again, around the airport. So to make their determination on those three topic areas, they do what we call an airport plan consistency review. State law requires the city to submit general plans and general plan amendments to the ALUC for consistency determination. And in September of 2022, the city submitted the housing element update for review. The housing element itself serves as the policy document for meeting the city's future housing needs at all economic levels. And staff will be bringing this policy document to you in the next few months for review. It includes a suitable sites inventory, identifying 23 sites suitable for residential development in the city to meet the city's 2023 to 2031 regional housing needs allocation. So on this table before you, it shows what our, and I know you guys have seen this before, but I just wanted to share it with the audience and you again so that you know what staff is dealing with. So our city's regional housing needs allocation for this planning cycle is 3,165 units. It is divided by different income categories. So we have 704 very low income units, 405 low-income units, 573 moderate income units, and 1,483 above moderate income units, otherwise known as market rate. And then we've added a 15% buffer onto that as recommended by HCD and council, and that brings our total of units up to 3,640 units. That is nearly a 200% more units than the previous cycle, and that previous cycle is 2015 to 2023, which is what we're in right now. And it's difficult for a mid-sized city like San Bruno to accommodate that much growth. So we had to search to try to find places to put the units in the city. So the housing element includes something that we call a suitable sites inventory. This inventory does not include the economic feasibility of specific sites, nor does it take into account consideration of the owner's intended use of the land now or in the future. It does not dictate where residential development will actually occur. The decision of whether or not to develop any particular sites always remains with the property owner. So this image is our sites inventory for the City of San Bruno's draft housing element. And as you can see, there are 23 sites. These sites are overlaid on top of the SFO noise contours. And that sites 14 and 19, 14 being the Tan Fran site and 19 being the pet hospital across the street on El Camino Real. Those two sites are located within the 70 to 75 decibel noise contour. These sites are the focus for tonight's These two sites are the focus for tonight's discussion, but the action is really involving the document itself, which is the draft housing element. So this Tanfran site has been identified in the site's inventory as a potential location for 1,000 housing units, and the San Bruno Pet Hospital has been identified as a potential housing site for 60 units. These two sites are located within Airport Influence Area B and within the 70 to 75 decibel noise contour. Within the 70 to 75 decibel noise contour, housing is prohibited, or I should say incompatible use according to the airport plan. This is a close-up view of both of those sites, again, relative to the noise contours from the plan. So early on, when the city got its RENA allocation from ABAG, the city met with ABAG staff. They identified this as a prime location, Tanfran that is, as a prime location for housing based upon the policies of Plan Bay Area 2050 and regional greenhouse gas reduction goals because of its proximity to transit. The pet hospital site is on a bus line and is within a half a mile of high-quality transit. ABAG did not take into consideration plans like the airport plan and the noise compatibility restrictions that regulate development of future housing when they utilized their urban simulation model to prepare the city's RENA allocation. So now it's a quick review of the housing element and its review by SFO. So on September 30th of this year, the city received a comment from SFO after they had reviewed our draft updated housing element, and that is attached to the staff report. They expressed concern that residential development within the 70 to 70 plus decibel noise contour is incompatible with their airport plan. And at this point, there's not enough detail, this being a policy document, to determine whether or not it's compatible with the airspace policies of the plan. It does comply with the safety policies. You can have housing within this area of the city from a safety perspective. On October 27th of this year, the Airport Land Use Committee, CCAG, reviewed the housing element, and they made a recommendation to the CCAG Board of Directors, acting as the ALUC for the county, that the update was inconsistent with the noise compatibility policies of the airport plan due to the location of the Tanfran and Pet Hospital sites within the noise contours. And then CCAG made their formal decision on November of this year, November 10th. And so now we have their formal resolution saying that the plan is inconsistent with the airport plan. The CCAG board also determined that the housing element is consistent with the airport plan safety policies. The associated general plan amendment that we are taking forward was also found to be consistent with the airport plan. And then again, they could not make a determination on the airspace compatibility, and that would be done on a project-by-project level at a later date when those projects are under review. So this ends my portion of the presentation, and I'm going to turn it back to Darcy for the remainder of the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. I'm back to talk about another very technical piece of this, the local override process. So again, as I presented previously, we're here tonight for a public hearing to discuss this proposed overriding action. And this is a process set forth in state law that has 3 steps. The first, we're here holding the public hearing. Then you're presented with a resolution that makes very specific findings about the housing element and that the local action for that housing element adoption, which would come before you in January, is consistent with the purposes of the Airport Land Use Commission statutes, which again are in state law. And then approval of this override action requires a 2/3 vote. That's 4 affirmative ayes, and must include adoption of the specific findings. Important to note, our neighbors have done this. So South San Francisco has done it for housing projects, including sites just to the north of us. Millbrae to the south has done it for land uses like life science projects that are under construction south of the station. And we're really here tonight because there's no housing there now, but also important to note that housing does exist historically in those noise contours. And there's mitigations that have already been added to some of those homes to address the noise. So I thought this chart would lay out the process, because again, it really involves 4 pretty big meetings, starting October 27th with that Airport Land Use Committee meeting, of which Councilmember Hamilton serves. Then November 10th, last week, Airport Land Use Commission, also referred to as the CCAG Board of Directors, of which Councilmember Salzar sits. And the determinations, again, as Mr. Smith mentioned, was inconsistency. But through this local override process, we can have the 2 public hearings before you, the first one tonight, the second one next year, to consider this resolution, making your local findings for this override. And again, what I mentioned previously is there's a 45 days between the public hearings, just like the previous item. That allows time for comment. Actually goes back to the Airport Land Use Committee staff, Ms. Kalkin at the CCAG, and then Caltrans Division of Aeronautics. Important to note, they can provide just comments. The council can take that into consideration at the next meeting, but it's just advisory. So I'll just touch on, what does that really mean? Okay, you're presenting us with this finding, that's a lot of text. What does that really mean? Well, it means that our local housing element, again, our local policy document may proceed as if it had been found consistent. So you're overriding that inconsistency determination. But what's also important to mention is that then SFO, under the laws, the state law and the local plan, is immune from liability for damages to property or personal injury caused by or resulting directly or indirectly from the public agency's decision to override the commission's action or recommendation. But again, with the housing element, as Mr. Smith noted, this is just a high-level policy document. This doesn't actually approve any housing. It's the city's proposal and policy document to address, as you know, our RENA obligations, which is, he said, is quite high. And many cities are grappling with trying to find sites for thousands of units. So what I've heard in the past, that we're sort of all in this together, finding different sites, and many of us are grappling with other challenges, and this is just the challenge that this community is facing. But you have this option to do the override. And again, just really important to emphasize that then the project would proceed through future scrutiny, through the public process, and also the California Environmental Quality Act process, and consistency with our general plan, which sets forth noise standards as well. So what would that mean? Well, what it basically comes down to is what we've also done historically and seen on homes that are in existence in those noise contours today. So it involves noise control measures, construction standards, and when you're building construction from scratch, you have a lot more ability to build that in to the project to lessen the noise impacts to the residents who could potentially live there one day. So there would be detailed acoustical analyses completed as part of the project, incorporating construction methods, sound attenuation features, sound reducing barriers to reduce the noise impacts to the maximum levels, which are actually in state law in the general plan, the interior noise levels of 45 decibels. So that is something that's done to reduce those noise levels. Sometimes you get double pane windows. I've even seen triple pane windows right on Caltrain, and I will tell you, it works. So the projects will also be required to incorporate real estate disclosures, whether they're rental units or potentially condominiums. It'll have that disclosure. Then the property owners would be required to grant avigation easements to City and County of San Francisco, which operates SFO. Again, that's standard, happens for other projects as well. But most importantly, I mentioned that issue around the shifting of liability from SFO. And in this case, the way that's resolved is an indemnification agreement with the city, ensuring that we are not held liable, since again, it's a private development project related to noise, that liability, should it arise in the future, is assumed by the development project. So I just want to point out a few more features of the override resolution, is again, the very specific findings in that resolution. This project provides, and which is the housing element, right, provides the identification of sites, which, as Mr. Smith said, provides much needed housing near transit to accomplish some of our greatest goals, reducing greenhouse gas, and achieving the vision of Plan Bay Area, and as well as our local planning documents. So mentioned there's advanced construction, noise techniques to reduce noise impacts to residents, and that would help us satisfy our RENA allocation and respond to the crisis facing the nation and the state. But as you've heard in the past, because you've learned a little bit about the TANFRAN preliminary project application, which has been submitted to the city, this is a great site for housing because it's near high quality transit. There's a BART station appended directly on the TANFRAN site, on El Camino Real with bus service, and a very short walk or bike ride to the Caltrain station in our downtown. It's also in a mixed use area, so what that really means is people will inherently walk and bike to get their commercial needs met rather than driving. Surrounded by an arterial and collector street network, so less trips on our neighborhood streets and more trips on the broader street network to support that, including Interstate 380. It's also really close to Highway 101 and 280, should people choose to drive. It's also, as you've heard, ripe for development. The mall is declining. That also means our city tax revenue is declining, and it's a keen interest in the city to make sure we always keep an eye on our fiscal sustainability, and sometimes that takes long-range planning, as you know. Buildings don't just pop up overnight. There's a series of city land use actions that put this into play over many years. And then, as I noted, the preliminary project application has been filed. That lends sort of a sense of this could actually happen, whereas many of the suitable sites, if you look at that list of 23 sites, they're privately owned and they may not actually be developed with housing. But we have to do our best to plan for the RENA goals and make the progress that we can make with the tools that we have before us, which are the planning documents. So again, the developer is serious about developing this site with housing, and what was submitted to the city in October shows at least 1,000 housing units with 15% affordable. So that's encouraging. So tonight's recommended action in closing is to have the public hearing to consider adoption of this resolution, which makes those draft findings, as mentioned previously and read by the clerk, and authorize the city manager to submit that resolution, if adopted, to the reviewing groups, and then schedule a public hearing, which we anticipate no later than the end of January, to adopt the housing element. So important to note, when if this does come back to you, should you adopt the resolution tonight, the next action is wrapped up with the adoption of the housing element, which is on a separate track too, to go through the Planning Commission first and then come before council. So that concludes presentation. Happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you for the presentation. I actually cannot see all the council members, so I'll start with the council members. Does anybody have any questions or comments for staff?
Through the Vice Mayor, I have a question.
Go ahead, Councilmember Hamilton.
So I just want to confirm, it's just a process question. So we are tonight voting to potentially override the decision, and or any if there potentially was a development at the pet hospital site. Those would go to airport land use. Those would likely get found, and we would go through this process again.
That's correct.
Okay, I just wanted to confirm that. And then my other question is for the city attorney. Would this be two separate actions when it comes time to make an action?
Is the action tonight two separate actions?
Yes.
Let me just double check if the resolution provides for it to be submitted. Yeah, it does. Okay, so it's just one action to adopt the resolution, which includes the direction to.
Got it.
To submit it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilmember Hamilton. Any questions, comments from the other council members?
Through the Vice Mayor.
Go ahead, Councilmember Medina.
Basically a comment. First of all, thanks to staff for putting this report together and bringing this necessary decision forward. I am in favor of this. It's what we need to do in order to add more housing to San Bruno, and it just happens to be underneath where the airport flies. So that's basically it, and I look forward to the vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Medina. Any other questions or comments? So I just have a couple of questions then. Some of the questions, I guess, that I've received on this particular development. So these rules are in place, would imagine, for a reason. And so I guess just a really basic question is, development is built, will there be nuisances from the airport noise to the residents who would potentially be living in this in a future development?
I believe the question I heard was, would there be nuisances from the noise to the future residents? Is that correct?
Yeah, yes. These are questions I'm receiving from residents, so I'm just conveying them, but I think they're definitely worth asking and getting answers to.
Right. Sure, Jenevein Grogan, let me answer that by saying nuisance is not a term of science, and what's a nuisance to one may not be a nuisance to others, and so I don't know that we can emphatically say that someone living there may not, that no one living there will find sound a nuisance. I think what we're saying is that there are modern techniques to attenuate sound and to design buildings such that they meet all legal and applicable standards, and that is certainly the standard that the city intends to hold the development to. And so many other areas in San Bruno. I think overall, potentially the greatest benefit is that the housing here will be constructed with modern techniques, and we know a lot of our existing housing.
Thank you, and I think it was brought to my attention the many double pane windows that have been replaced throughout the San Bruno and South San Francisco areas because of the noise from the airport. So that's one big question I've gotten. Another question is regarding height and whether there are concerns with the height of the airplanes with the height of the development and whether that should be of concern.
So I want to make sure that we don't veer too far to talk specifically about the future development because that's not what the action that is before the city council. But I think in response to that, it's important to note that limit, and in fact, the city's limit is lower than the FAA limit, and so the proposed development is not going.
Thank you. And then just the crux of a lot of the development that we're talking about right now is as a result of the jobs and housing imbalance. So just my comments regarding this future development is that if you haven't been following development in San Bruno, the YouTube project has been estimated to bring in 500 additional employees per year for years to come. The new development at Southline is expected to bring at least 6,000 employees. We don't know yet what's going to happen with the property that Amazon purchased. And this particular development is also anticipated to bring in quite a few employees. And so there is jobs and housing imbalance. and that in addition to the RENA allocations that the City of San Bruno has been mandated to achieve really results in a need for housing, and this does appear to be one of the best locations to place a significant amount of housing to not just meet the needs, but where there's actually going to be a quality of life for those who are living in those units. So those are my only comments. I think at this point, if we would like to, we can open this up to, this is a public hearing, so can we go ahead and open this item up for any members of the public who'd like to speak?
I believe we have an in-person member of the public that would like to speak. Michael Cohen.
Great, thank you. It's a bit of reverb. Good evening, for the record, Michael Cohen. I'm a principal with Strata Investment Group. We are part of the development team for Tanforan. I'm here to speak in support of staff's recommendation on this measure and want to make 2 points for the record. The first is we are committed to bringing to fruition the project set forth in the project application that we filed last month, and that includes over 1,000 units of really desperately needed housing. Second, we are keenly aware of the requirements that apply to housing close to airports, including specifically at this site, given its proximity to SFO. We are extremely confident that there are, frankly, multiple construction solutions to mitigate the sound requirements that we have to meet, not just as a matter of law, but because we're going to be renting apartments to tenants for a very long time to make sure that we have tenants that are happy. And also we understand and are committed to meeting the easement and indemnification and other requirements that Ms. Smith recommended. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Cohen. Any other speakers on Zoom or in person?
Yes, we have Felix O. Young. Okay, Felix, whenever you're ready, you may begin.
Hi there. Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great, thank you. Sorry, I apologize, I'm in the car. This is Felix O. Young from Midpen Housing. I just want to state that I'm in support of the city making such great efforts to increase its housing supply, both market rate and affordable. And I am also in support of the city seeking flexibility on how to do that. And I'm glad that by this action, there will still be further studies that will be conducted in order to evaluate the feasibility of the site to ensure the safety, which has already been, I think, confirmed, but also the noise to make sure that we can mitigate that in any housing development. So, so I'm in support of finding that flexibility for the city to get more housing, for the city broadly. So thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Next speaker, please.
I do not see any other hands raised.
Okay. And there's nobody else in person?
I do not have any speaker cards.
Okay, thank you. City Attorney, do we need to motion to close the public hearing?
Vice Mayor Mason, I believe that's the city's typical practice, is to have a motion to close the public hearing and take a vote.
Vice Mayor
Do we
Mason,
have that?
we have one hand that just went up.
Okay, please let them speak. Thank you.
I will bring in Vaughn Gregory. Vaughn Gregory, whenever you're ready, you may begin.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hi, this is Vaughn Gregory. I live on Green Avenue in San Bruno, and I just want to, want to ask every council member who is considering putting residential housing at the Tanforan site and overriding the noise the noise limits there. I'm sorry, I'm not prepared to make comments, but what I want you to do is every one of you council members who wants to have housing there, I realize that you can build all kinds of structures that will eliminate a lot of the noise from the airplanes, but I want you to go for half an hour and stand in Tanforan. And along with housing, you're going to have to put in open space. And I presume that there will be children playing in open space areas and people visiting, walking around. I want you to go for a half an hour, probably even 15 minutes, and tell me how comfortable you are in that atmosphere with planes overhead constantly. Can you carry on a conversation? Can you play a game? Are you comfortable with airplanes overhead consistently? So that's all I'm asking right now. I know South San Francisco has overridden all of the regulations for the airport, but I'm asking you as my representatives to make sure that you would be comfortable with your children playing in that atmosphere over and over again. And that's all I have to say for now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Gregory.
Okay, no other hands are raised.
Okay. Would anyone like to motion to close the public hearing?
I'd like to make a motion to close the public hearing.
Thank you, Councilmember Hamilton. Do we have a second?
Second, Medina.
Thank you, Councilmember Medina. Roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Hamilton,
Aye.
Councilmember Marty Medina,
Aye.
Councilmember Salazar,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Mason,
Aye.
and Mayor Rico Medina is recused.
Thank you. Gone ahead and close the public hearing. So it's now back to council. Any follow-up questions or comments? Nope. Seeing as how there is none, would anyone like to take action?
Through the Vice Mayor, I'll make a motion to adopt the resolution and to authorize the city manager to submit the resolution to the ALUC, both as read by the city clerk.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Hamilton. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Councilmember Medina. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Hamilton,
Aye.
Councilmember Marty Medina,
Aye.
Councilmember Salazar,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Mason,
Aye.
Mayor Rico Medina is recused.
Okay, and I believe there's a second item. So for the second item, do we have a motion? Just want to make sure they weren't included in one, but I believe that we do need to have a separate action. Is that correct?
Through the Vice Mayor, my motion took care of both.
Oh, great. Okay, perfect. Just want to make sure of that. Thank you. In that case, I think we can call Mayor Medina back in.
He is on his way.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vice
Thank
Mayor.
you, Mayor Medina. I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Now we'll move on to item number 7, please.
Item 7A, reappoint expired members and make.
How I'd like to take this is, first, I'm going to go ahead and make a motion and recommendation who have asked for reappointment, that they be reappointed to those bodies. Seconded by Michael Salazar. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Hamilton,
Aye.
Councilmember Marty Medina,
Aye.
Councilmember Salazar,
Aye.
And are signing up to serve again. Next, we will begin with Culture and Arts Commission. Here's my understanding, and anybody can crucial term. With that said, I will make a recommendation and motion that Megan B. Salazar. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Hamilton,
Aye.
Councilmember Marty Medina.
To both the applicants. And then next, we'll move on to Park and Recreation Commission. Great, and we appreciate all of them. At this time, I'm going to ask the Councilmember Salazar.
I will nominate Wesley Liu.
Is there a second?
I will second.
Is there any nominations from the floor? Is there any action by, or a second?
I'll second.
Motion made.
Member Salazar.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Mason.
Aye.
Mayor Rico Medina.
Willingness to serve, and congratulations to Wesley. Next, we move on to traffic. Is there nominations from the floor?
Through the mayor?
Through the mayor.
Councilmember, there are nominations from the floor.
Through the chair.
Councilmember Salazar,
I will nominate Quentin Cutlip.
is there a second? Two individuals, Quentin and Sean. So what we'll do is we'll go through and we'll call the person that was not in favor of Sean. Please say, oh, I'm sorry. We're going to do a roll call.
Vice Mayor Mason.
Aye.
Mayor Rico Medina.
No. So we have a 3-2 in favor of Sean Quinn for the trappers in their time. Is there any other action necessary by some city public that wanted to speak? And I apologize, but I don't think there are on Zoom, and I know they're not. On to this study session.
Item 8.
We'll begin with the city manager, and then he will go ahead and introduce those that we'll be hearing from this evening.
Sure. Here and in the room. Jenevein Grogan, City Manager. It is my pleasure to introduce this item tonight. And just by way of background, I want to talk a little bit about CityNet. And so, cities providing cable TV services, and 20 years ago added broadband internet. We currently serve approximately 46% of San Bruno households, and you will have a number of stats today on operations and performance of the enterprise. In addition, we have what's called a coax cable plant, where we have coax cable serving a number of homes, but approximately 18% of our footprint has fiber, which we know is the gold standard. As the City Council knows, CityNet has had lots of successes as an enterprise, but also has not recovered its full cost. It did, for the vast majority of its existence, cover its full costs. Currently, there is a loan balance to the general fund of $14 million and a total negative fund balance of $18 million, and we'll talk about that shortly. And what the City Council knows is that the City Council has directed and been very focused on developing a plan for CityNet to both reduce operating losses, return it to profitability, and directed last year is that the city undertake a process to have an independent evaluation of that business plan. And so based on that recommendation and concurrence with the City Council, the city released an RFP, a request for proposals. We then selected JSI, who performed firm is here tonight and will present that evaluation. And what you'll see in that evaluation is that there are a number of plans or ways to move forward. All of them require investment in infrastructure, and as we know, that is the significant challenge with CityNet. Being in this business requires investment in infrastructure, and we remain at a crossroads. But before we hear from JSI, we will hear first a presentation from the Director of City due to the city. And so without further ado, I will turn the present over to Director Krishnamurthy.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of the Council. My name is Sandeep Krishnamurthy. I'm the Director of San Bruno CityNet Services, and here to present the San Bruno. Okay. Before I begin, I'd like to acknowledge the presence of my colleagues from San Bruno CityNet who are here in the audience today. Meiko Rodriguez, Arthur Quiroz, Ruel Regudan, Amanda Lapise and Jonathan Wong. Okay, thank you. The agenda for today's study session, I'd like to go over the current situation, and then before I present the next piece, which is the proposed next steps, we will have a presentation from Mr. Dave Lewis, a principal with JSI Consulting. The current situation. Straight off, as mentioned by the city manager, the loan advances we have outstanding from CityNet to the general fund amount to a little over $14 million, and the total fund balance shows a current negative of almost 17 point national footprint of the cable television industry. In 2018, the cable television industry had about 66.5 million internet subscribers, and that swelled through COVID to the current time to about 82 million. And it had about 52 million television subscribers, and that's gone down to about 43. And today they've come down to about 25 million. Now, how do we stack up against that in San Bruno CityNet? In terms of the internet, while nationally the internet footprint for cable has gone from 53 to 67%, we've remained stable at 44, exactly 44% in 2018, as with all homes, to about 35% as of today. We have gone down from 38% to about 26%. And in terms of phones, we've gone up slightly from 6% to 7% against a national fall from 25 to 20%. In terms of subscribers, what you see in the second column, well, first of all, present is this is the time frame in which we have instituted some changes within the enterprise and in terms of our business model. So in 2018-19, we had 7,642 homes, of which 6,746 were internet and 4,000, almost 5,000 were television subscribers. As of this past month, we have 6,660 homes, a reduction by 982 homes, or about 12%. And our internet subscriber base of about 3.5%. On the other hand, our television base has reduced by about 21% from 2018-19 through to last month. So a bigger drop in television subscribers, which has led to a drop in remained stable at 44% of the population served in San Bruno. And the reason we make the claim is prior, in 2018-19, we were going off of this to 14,701. So as a percentage of those homes served, we've remained stable at 44, though the numbers are different. To call out the total service homes from September 22, we have 6,660, which represents 46% of the households, in 12.15 million. And we collected revenues of 9.739. So I'd like to emphasize that the revenue numbers you see on this slide are collected revenue numbers and not the numbers billed. In contrast, in the 22-23 budget, we 8.9 million, as opposed to 9.739, so about $900,000 less than 18-19. The reduction you see on the previous slide from 2019 to 2023 amounts to 3.5 million, almost 3.5 million in expenses, but a reduction of 802,000 in revenues. So essentially, the difference between the improvement of 77% across the past 4 years. So in essence, where we were losing $1 before, 4 years ago, we are now losing 23 cents. This slide covers the sum total of capital investments made, 18.165 million spent over a period of 51 years to take the enterprise from its start in 1971 through the current time. The last big expense made was in the router upgrade, which ended in 2018. And since then, we have not made any capital expenditures into the infrastructure of the system. The amount spent nationally for infrastructure upgrades, in the last 20 years, the cable industry has spent $300 billion and generated 18.1 million across 50 years. And in the last 20, we have made 185 million, which leads to a rather skewed number. Indicates is a really good return, but that return is tempered by the fact that there hasn't been more of an investment in infrastructure. New streaming TV packages on the horizon and a new rate card due to be launched. And this should happen sometime in the next 2.5 months. We're almost at the final stage of completing the link-ups required to present a new frontier for us in terms of how we sell television services into our footprint. What this implies is that all the channels we have on our platform will become high definition by default. Right now, we have a mix of standard definition and high definition. So what it implies is a quality neighborhood as a test project in San Bruno, and this is the Marisol neighborhood. We've been doing reasonably well there, and I'll cover those numbers in a subsequent slide. We've been looking at performance improvements. We have recently commissioned a new had before, which was 22.5 gigabits of internet connectivity through to 30 gigabits. And the reason this became necessary and why the timing is good for this is thanks to COVID, our usage of the internet in our system went up from 12 gigabits at its peak monthly we currently have in place using the internet on the system. We have sampled new types of internet marketing to targeted populations, especially within MDUs or multiple dwelling units in Shelter Creek. We are continuing with cost controls. We have been engaged with vendors throughout the last 4 years to try and bring costs down, which is why we can make the claim that we've reduced expenses by $3.5 million. But the bulk of it is due to cost controls put in place. We have upgraded Channel 1, and today you're on high definition in addition to standard definition. What has happened to customer calls from July 2019 through to this past month? A steady reduction in the number of calls or call volumes received at the system and by our support system that takes on after working hours and supports our current low of about 600 monthly calls. And we have similar decreases in the number of calls that are cable related as well as those that are fiber related. The fiber being the bottom line on the graph, the line in yellow, which has historically always been at a low. The implication of this is the number of faults that come up due to fiber service to the home are very, very low. Numbers have declined. Almost by default, we have seen a reduction in the number of calls coming in to service those remaining subscribers. This slide covers keep going up, and currently there are over 2 million apps in each of the iOS and the Android app stores, and those numbers only going up every month. So as those apps that are sampled by customers go up, they need more bandwidth and they need more speed, both upstream and downstream bandwidths to end users, that is our customers. There's a whole world of Internet of Things or connected appliances coming into play in the marketplace. Virtually every appliance that we can currently buy and going forward even more so are likely to be, and that means even more usage of the internet within the home. Finally, there is the big explosion of streaming video, and this is an area in which even we want to enter as a replacement for our current cable TV platform. And this is something that has seen explosive growth both through the COVID period and will continue on, and in any format that requires fixed wired access to the customer's home. So where we are today, we have served this community for 51 years. We have seen an explosion in traffic, both in terms of television minutes consumed in the pre-pandemic period to a peak of 23 gigabits right now. It just calls for better levels of connectivity that we need to have to be able to service our customers. About 18%, a little over 18% of the system's footprint in fiber to the home mode, and we have done very well there. we currently have a 67% subscriber penetration. The system needs to offer, of course, higher speeds, better bandwidth, and position itself better to be able to service its subscribers. So the conclusion of this slide is that we can be best positioned if we look at doing fiber to the home, and higher speeds to our customers who have increasingly indicated that they prefer to access cable systems and cable platforms for internet access. The links, smart traffic, smart energy, and smart health, and so on. So that's the other part of the grand societal rationale available for a build out of fiber in pretty much any location. This slide goes further into the same level of detail. Now, in terms of specifics for a smart city where it's streetlights that could be serviced through fiber internet. Now, what makes this different from servicing it through, shall we say, regular cable is that fiber has very high availability, having very little need for electricity and, as we well know, the chance of going down when there's a power outage. So it gives us pretty clear, always available access to regulate these lights and monitor their usage through time and react pretty quickly when there's any water meters, all of which could be again serviced through fiber connectivity in a much better fashion than would otherwise be the case through regular cable. And like to embrace at the level of the city is also relevant for parking meters, about which you have heard from the police chief a few weeks ago. We currently offer connectivity to the district, to the police department, wireless access to the Sweeney Ridge camera systems operated by the fire department, and also here at the senior center, and in the new SB rack facility as well. So, and should push for operational continuity and also a neighborhood fiber upgrade from the point of view that we can assist with the city going smart as quickly as possible and in as many areas as possible. So far, the return on investment we have seen from fiber investments we have made in San Bruno has been very distinctly positive. A subscription rate of 67% in the areas serviced, and going to the last but one row in the table you see in front of you on this slide, it's the Marisol upgrade. We did a test project, as I mentioned before, to roll out fiber to single-family homes. And out of the 100 homes we have rolled out fiber to, we currently have about 42 subscribers, which is not exactly as good as what we have with the MDUs, but it's still a pretty good early penetration, given that we have started marketing the service only in July. The professionalism of the staff has been mentioned in all three instances, and the quality of the service provided, so far at least, has been well remarked by these customers. For the next part of the presentation, I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Dave Lewis from GSI, our consultant who's standing by.
Thank you very much so far for the presentation.
Pleasure to address the council this evening. I'm Dave Lewis. I'm a vice president with JSI. We are a business networking consulting firm, principally focusing on the needs of mid-tier, mid-market broadband and telecommunications.
Mr. Lewis, this is the mayor. I apologize for the pause. City manager?
Yeah, Dave, we're just not seeing your image nor sharing.
I apologize. Let me see if I can get this fired up here. I apologize. We're talking about technology. I'm not a Zoom devotee. I'm a Cisco WebEx Teams guy. So let me see if I can get this. For some reason, I can't get this to full screen, so I apologize. Let me see if I can.
Mr. Lewis, would a couple minutes?
Yes.
Would a couple minute break be in order for you?
That'd be great.
Okay.
Yes, if that works for the city council, then I'll see if I can
So right now,
rectify this.
Yes, Mr. Lewis. Right now, the city council will go ahead, go into, we'll just recess for a few minutes. We're going to be right here, but we're going to recess and we'll get the technical difficulties ironed out. So.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay. Why don't we now bring the city council back into session? And again, we are on the study session, which is receive and discuss the report on the evaluation of the San Bruno CityNet Services Enterprise and Business Plan. And we'll turn it back over to Mr. Lewis, please.
Thank you. Thanks for your indulgence. I appreciate it. Apologize for the technical difficulties, and we'll jump right into this. Again, my name is Dave Lewis. I'm a vice president with JSI. As I was mentioning, we're a consulting firm with the principal focus of providing technical, managerial, engineering, regulatory services to broadband and communication providers throughout the United States. We'll go into that background in a little bit further in the coming slides. We'll jump right into the agenda. Again, we'll provide a brief background on our firm and our specialties, areas of practice area of focus, provide a background in terms of the scope of the engagement, what we were focusing on in conjunction with the engagement from the city. We'll talk a little bit about the market dynamics that we see both today and those forecast, which really cast the dire effect the operations and commercial prospects of CityNet's enterprise and operation. We'll quickly go over a technology overview as it pertains to the technologies examined in terms of a potential overbuild or retrofit of CityNet's infrastructure. In conjunction with that overview, we'll then go into a high-level summary of the analysis conducted over a range of scenarios that we examined involving both fiber to the premise, network overbuild, as well as a CATV retrofit, and also an examination of a scenario where, in essence, the city would exit the CATV market and really focus its efforts solely on the broadband suite of services to the city's residents. And then we'll go into the recommendations for business continuity surrounding the CityNet's enterprise. Before I get started, any questions in terms of the agenda? And obviously, if there are any specific areas you would like to explore based on preliminary briefings, certainly would be happy to answer those before we get into the meat of the presentation.
I'd say
okay, great.
Go ahead and proceed.
Okay,
please.
great. Okay, great. As I noted, our focus has historically been providing kind of a life cycle engagement with our clients from the point of analysis through any kind of engineering exercise, deployment of technologies, and ultimately optimization of the technologies and business case deployed by a particular firm. We're celebrating our 60th year as a consultancy. We have roughly 600 employees across a range of practice areas, again, engineering, financial, operational, regulatory compliance. We serve roughly 600 broadband telecommunication providers that look very much like the city in terms of its relative scale and product makeup. And we've been fortunate in that we have a long employee tenure, and we're led by a group of senior executives that all have decades of experience in this field. In terms of this specific engagement, it was principally financial in nature in terms of an examination of the CityNet's enterprise and its prospects going forward. These are the individuals that were involved with the project in various forms. Each of these folks have decades of experience in telecommunications and finance related matters. So certainly have a deep bench that was brought in to examine the city's operations, and we'll get into the findings of that analysis shortly. So in terms of engagement scope, we were contracted by the city to conduct a financial assessment of the enterprise, specifically the CityNet's current product portfolio involving voice, video, and broadband offerings, And the scope of our analysis really entailed a detailed examination of the organization's overall financial performance, as well as the discrete levels of performance related to each individual product offering, the trajectory of that product offering and its financial performance, and then the implications of that performance on the consolidated operations of the enterprise. Conjunctively with that, JSI examined the financial feasibility attached to either rehabbing the city's existing coaxial infrastructure necessary to revitalize its capabilities in order to deliver the service capabilities which would address the rapidly evolving needs of the city's residents. And we'll get into some of those trends shortly. And we looked at rehab or overbuild again under both a fiber to the premise, so driving fiber all the way to the premise, be that a commercial enterprise or a residential establishment. And again, when we look at that, and we'll talk about the level of investment that is going to be required and under both of those scenarios. So part and parcel of our analysis was determining whether or not there was a sufficient business case to, in essence, create a return or payback proposition on the additional investment that would be attended to that rehab or overbuild, and whether or not a financially viable proposition could be constructed, and if so, under what circumstances. Obviously, I would encourage the council members to stop me at any point and ask a question. We'll deep dive and ensure that your questions are answered, and we can address any questions that you may have. I think as a foundational matter to set the tone here, I think it's important to discuss the market dynamics surrounding both traditional cable television as well as broadband internet, both of which are undergoing significant and accelerating change, and interestingly enough, in polar opposite directions. From a CATV perspective, as Sandeep noted, we're seeing an erosion of subscription rate. That's not only occurring relative to the CityNet's enterprise, in which I think you saw roughly between January of 21 and 22, roughly a 20% pullback. But we're seeing that as a systemic condition. There's a lot, you've probably heard about cable cord cutting as an industry. We're forecasting that CATV providers will lose roughly 4.9 million customers this year alone. And we're seeing those customers move for a variety of reasons, but obviously the ascension of streaming services and the flexibility that streaming offers, and oftentimes the more attractive economics is driving that acceleration in terms of that systemic shift away from linear CATV products. At the same time, broadband and its utilization, again, as Sandeep noted, is seeing an explosion of bandwidth growth. And the graphic to the right illustrates that consistent forecasted growth in demand that all providers are seeing. And that's a good thing and a bad thing. There's an upside and a downside. Clearly this is becoming a central service akin to electricity back in the mid 1900s. It is an essential service that is really going to set the tone for a geographic area's ability to attract jobs, promote business formation, enhance housing values, and a range of other attributes. It really is the critical piece of infrastructure of our time. However, that growth does impose an obligation on providers to ensure that the network they're using to provide that service is sufficiently capable to meet this increasing demand. And I think that's where a rub exists with regard to the CityNet enterprise. The expansion of that demand has outstripped the ability of the network to support the consumer's demands and expectations with regard to what that network is capable of delivering. And the reality of this is the current coax cable-heavy network is simply not going to be able to support these needs as forecasted, and candidly today, absent a material investment. So the prospects for CityNet's operation across the board are really tied to the relative capabilities of the underlying network. And to the extent that investment is delayed or deferred, your competitive relevancy, the value you're able to deliver to the marketplace is going to be inhibited. Consumers are going to act on the friction created, and the prospects for the enterprise, both financially and strategically, are going to continue to erode. Before I move on, any questions so far? Great.
No.
So in order to
continue.
In order to fully explore the prospects and opportunities for the CityNet suite of services, we analyzed several scenarios. One is, what is the current trajectory of the business case? What is the current arc of financial performance? So if we look at your historic financials, take the trajectory of the trends that we're seeing in that business case and forecast them forward. What are the prospects for the business if left in steady state and unaltered? The second is to, in essence, look at fiber to the premise overbuild, then look at an alternative technology in terms of a coaxial plant rehab, which is taking your existing plant and retrofitting it to bring it up to the current standards to support a gigabit enabled solution, and then finally exit from the cable television market. In each one of these scenarios relative to the second, third, and fourth scenarios that I just highlighted, we looked at those scenarios and further broke those out into, if those technologies or those actions were taken and we remain with our base case scenario, i.e. the current complexion of the operating performance and cost characteristics, what does that commercial performance look like? Then if we optimized or enacted certain rehabilitation actions to the business case involving a range of different areas of operational optimization, what are the prospects for the business? And we'll go over those scenarios in some measure of detail. So we'll roll this in terms of the base scenario and the forecast of existing operations. One caveat I want to introduce is that obviously management is keenly and acutely aware of the current trajectory of the business, the challenges that it faces, and some of the corrective actions that need to be pursued to change the arc of that negative cash flow or profitability and bring that back into compliance in an attempt to generate positive cash flow. So the forecasts that I'm about to review with the council reflect the trajectory of the analyzed metrics prior to a number of optimization efforts that management has been engaged in. So to the extent that management has provided end-of-year forecasts or forecasts for next year, they may differ as they may contemplate the effects of those optimization efforts, whereas our analysis that we'll discuss is based on the trajectory, based on the information supplied prior to engagement of those efforts. So the first scenario that I'll go over is the base scenario, which in essence provides a long-term forecast associated with the earnings forecast for the enterprise through 2037. The forecast was in essence based on kind of a forensic examination of historic trends at the individual account level. So we broke down, in essence, the general level accounting structure. We applied various forecasting techniques on an account level basis. A number of different techniques were used based on the certain likely outcomes, such as, escalation in wages, which we forecast at 3% a year, just to put some context in terms of likely outcomes. The earnings forecast that you see to the right is a representation of that activity. As you can see over time, based on, again, principally linear regression assessment of forecasting those traditional historic trends forward, produces a relative decline in the prospects for the organization. Obviously, as any enterprise is faced with changing conditions, management would act on this. This is not a static condition, and we would fully expect that, again, as any commercial exercise or commercial enterprise would, that actions would be taken to, again, bend the arc of what's being forecast here. But if nothing is done, this is, in essence, the trajectory of the business as it stands. Sandeep or Jovan, I don't know if you want to weigh in here before I proceed. This scenario examined an overbuild of the city's existing coaxial-based plant with fiber to the premise network capable of delivering both shared and dedicated multi-gigabit broadband services to the home. So the technology that we were looking at here, and the ability to deliver symmetrical upload download speeds of up to 10 gigabytes, which is in keeping with the long-range forecast. Obviously, you wouldn't want to invest heavily in a network without the prospect for that network being able to meet the needs well into the future. So as Joanne noted, that this framework really represents the gold standard relative to technology. Fiber is fully future-proof. There isn't a rehab or tear out of the underlying mainline fiber. You simply upgrade the electronics as that technology progresses. So you're always, in essence, in a position to meet the prospective needs of your subscriber. And Sandeep went over a number of future-facing applications of a smart city that are going to continue to intensify utilization of this network. Obviously, you're not operating in a vacuum. You have a number of competitors that you face. So this isn't an issue of pulling even. If you're going to look to justify a level of investment necessary to, in essence, again, bend the arc of your financial performance, it's important to competitively differentiate your services from those offered today to try to, again, expand your competitive relevance and recapture some of the customers that you've lost over time as a consequence of the infirmities in the existing network. In terms of the, again, high level, the engineering analysis looked at basically about 8,800 passings. The architecture involved placement of roughly 112 miles of fiber optic facilities, and the estimated total cost of that deployment is roughly $18.7 million. When you look at the implications of that, again, what we looked at is a base with debt. So you look at, in essence, what happens if you invest in the plant, you service the debt required to, in essence, finance or capitalize that investment, and that capital cost is then layered on your existing operational expenses. And so what does the prospect look like as is? And then the second business case to the right of that, modified with debt, is an example. What were the assumed changes that produced the delta from a combined $38 million loss to a $17 million contribution? They covered actually a range of different metrics. First, your average revenue per user changed from 6861 to 8129. And that was in essence produced assuming an elimination of a number of grandfathered rate designs, consolidation of numerous rate tiered schedules into a more concise set of rate offerings that really emphasize speed and competitive differentiation. And then obviously from a marketing perspective, more aggressive efforts to sell value associated with higher speed and tier offerings. And one of the things that we noted, for example, is the demise of the video business as people move to video services. Roughly 80% of internet traffic is associated with video, right? So getting people to, in essence, as they move to streaming, move up the value chain, the speed tier offerings to higher ARPU services is part and parcel with encouraging that migration. We also looked at an increase in subscription levels of 10 to 15%. When we looked at, again, just the subscription numbers that were provided, when you looked at January 21 through January 22, like roughly a 10% attrition, this would assume that, you know, you capture those back, plus you're able to make some competitive inroads with other providers in terms of their market share within the San Bruno market. Again, we think that that's something that's realizable based on the higher market share resulting from a more compelling, robust, differentiated offering that would be supported through the deployment of this state-of-the-art fiber optic network. It also noted that we were going to rationalize certain OpEx. So these are all on the revenue side. We also looked at the expense side of the equation, with CATV programming costs being adjusted to represent 70% of cable television top line revenue. Sandeep has successfully negotiated that outcome. And Sandeep, I believe that's what you referred to in terms of implementation of the new format that you discussed in your presentation. This would obviously be a material reduction from prevailing levels, which would again drive margin. And then finally, remaining operating costs were pared 25% over the baseline levels examined, except for the city corporate allocated expenses, which were maintained at 100% of forecasted levels. So bottom line here, there is a path to, in essence, place of, fiber to the premise infrastructure, create a radically more robust level of services and extend those to the city's residents, and support that investment and drive a reasonable level of positive cash flow across the modeled window. The issue at hand, obviously, is the extent to which the city feels confident that the changes or levels of optimization that are cited here are within the city's grasp to execute on and produce. And we'll get into that a little further as we go through the presentation. Any questions in terms of the fiber to the premise scenario that we discussed?
No, please proceed.
Okay. With regard to CATV and coax, that involved, again, a network retrofit. Obviously, a substantially lower level of fiber with the principal focus to rehab the existing infrastructure. The estimated cost is substantially less at 6.2, which is roughly 3.5 in infrastructure cost, with the remaining balance being an upgrade to the DOCSIS software used power or light, so to speak, that coaxial network. Again, the key benefit of this scenario is it leverages the existing infrastructure within the core network. It would allow the city to offer a gigabit level of services based on an asymmetrical basis. So you could not offer symmetrical speeds in terms of upload, download speeds, which is available through fiber. And then, as we've noted, we're seeing basically a vertical growth in broadband speed demand. So this design will require subsequent investment by the city in order to remain in step with the forecasted marketplace trends that were cited in a previous slide. With regard to the financial prospects attendant to this particular scenario, again, the base is just looking at that retrofit with no optimization, while the schedule to the right assumes the same attributes of optimization that I just went over in terms of the relative magnitude, in terms of the increase in your average revenue per use, in terms of this level of revenue generated per subscriber, elimination of those grandfathered rate designs, consolidation of those rate structures, and so forth. Again, this assumes that same level of optimization for the CATV programming cost, as well as the 25% pairing of prevailing operating expenses. In essence, getting out of the CATV business, we've seen a number of our clients exit the CATV business as it, in essence, programming costs have marched forward on a very consistent basis in terms of the increases in inflation that we've seen in those programming costs, which is in essence met with obviously a reaction on the subscriber side, leading to an acceleration in cord cutting. So obviously the natural question posed is, why don't we just exit the business? That is not a quick fix, as this illustration shows. That negative $54 million, obviously there are certain revenues generated from the cable TV business, and absent optimization or a significant pairing of prevailing operational costs to right size the business, recognize that revenue stream, that product function is no longer required, and paring back the operational scope in order to right size the business requires, instead of a 25% reduction in operating costs, you're really looking at a 56% reduction over current levels. One of the questions beyond the dollars and cents, obviously, is the assessment of broadband as a public good. There are a range of studies that correlate the economic development prospects of a geography with the relative availability of broadband and the relative robustness of that underlying infrastructure. And this is benefits associated with it, lead to higher property values, increased job and population growth, higher risk rates of business formation, and lower unemployment rates. As a city, clearly that public good and the, in essence, acceleration across the board in all of those key areas is extremely connected to your mission. So in the evaluation of the business case, clearly from a qualitative perspective, this public good nature of broadband and your unique position as the guarantor of equitable broadband access is worthwhile to examine. However, every qualitative good, even if it can be distilled down into a financial outcome, has a certain breaking point. So the weight assigned to the importance of this public good attribute is really kind of hangs on a couple of specific considerations. Specifically, if the city were to exit the market, would access to high-speed broadband within the city be materially impacted? Are there other folks that would step in to the breach and provide a consistent, capable of providing? Will they be in it for the long term and be progressive in meeting some of these future-facing needs of the smart city that Sandeep covered? Secondly, would the affordability of broadband access suffer as a result of the city's exit from the market? Ultimately, these are the questions that really provide that context relative to the qualitative public policy considerations. And then ultimately, it's a practical matter. Can the city bend the arc, so to speak, by optimizing the areas of performance necessary to produce those positive cash flow forecasts that we went over? Is it within the city's grasp to execute on those optimization of broadband? Since 2016, the price of broadband has fallen roughly 26%. A product is being commoditized as a consequence. As all these cable companies are experiencing the same level of attrition, the service that remains in high demand is broadband. So that is the target to which everybody is directing their focus, creating a more intensive level of pricing pressure. So, to conclude, as far as our recommendations are concerned, you can't disconnect the financial prospects of the city, nor its stewardship of attempting to provide that public good that enables all of the things that we just referenced without a revitalized infrastructure. Investment in the city's infrastructure is going to happen if the city's CityNet services are going to be viable moving forward. Obviously, when we look at the options to do so, fiber represents the gold standard and places you in the best position to have a differentiated service to position the city to address the ongoing needs, the evolving needs of the marketplace, both in terms of the evolving and rapidly expanding needs and demands of your city's residents and businesses. But obviously it comes at a price. Upgrading the city's CATV infrastructure stems the attrition or the prospects to, in essence, see a devolving level of competitive relevancy and value in the eyes of your subscribers. That level at $6.2 million level of investment would, in essence, enable an asymmetric gig service, which obviously would meet the needs of the vast majority of your subscribers today. The issue is obviously ongoing investments would be required as demands continue to evolve, as they're forecasted to do. In terms of the business case itself, obviously to engage in a reinvestment under either scenario in a financially responsible way, the city has to determine whether or not it can successfully execute on the required initiatives necessary to optimize the city's operation. That means better performance on the revenue side through higher levels of average revenue per user, greater levels of market share, as well as a concurrent pairing of the operational costs that are currently being experienced by the enterprise. If you're unable to do that, obviously the financial ability to either remediate your coax plant and finance that remediation or engage in and pay for that fiber to the premise network and generate positive cash flow would be substantially compromised. So again, from our perspective, what we would recommend is that the city formulate a detailed tactical plan to reach the level of financial and operational optimization necessary to engage in this remediation on a financially responsible way. That plan could then be assessed by the city as in terms of your confidence of the feasibility of executing and producing the financial outcomes associated with those optimization efforts, so that again, you could, on a financially responsible way, engage in the remediation necessary to keep the enterprise and its operations, its products offerings, maintain that relevancy to the marketplace. Any questions or thoughts on the material presented? Presentation.
Okay, and then finally, we're going to go back to staff to conclude the presentation for this evening.
Thank you, Dave. Now for the second part of my presentation. So following on from Dave Lewis's presentation, I have some proposed next steps, and this is also based on my earlier presentation as well. Okay.
Quickly, Sandeep, I apologize. Would you like me to remain on the line or excuse myself from the meeting?
No, Dave, please stay. We will conclude with a few.
Great, thank you.
Okay. So going into the first slide of this second part of my presentation, what we propose following on from all the learnings we have taken on board from JSI, we propose a hybrid solution, and it comprises two parts. One, we maintain the operational status of the enterprise itself so that it continues fiber upgrade, which we already began many years ago. As I mentioned before, we currently have 18% of the city in fiber, and our proposition is to take this forward and continue upgrading to fiber to the home. To keep the system operational, what we would recommend is eliminate managers' active taps. And taps are a piece of equipment that we have throughout our system. They rely on electricity, they frequently burn out, and they need to be replaced, and they're managed by the server, which is again distributed through the system. And we have replaced, and we undertook this replacement a year ago. We've currently replaced over 525, 530 taps, and we have 1,040 taps on order. We have this replacement process being done by our own technicians, and ask, if you will, is to get some money to outsource a part of this tap replacement, especially those taps that need to be replaced in the backyards of people's homes that require a full team to go in and make those changes. And if that were to be approved, then it would accelerate rollouts. Now, we have had a successful test of this rollout in the Marisol neighborhood. What we propose doing is continuing with this type of neighborhood by neighborhood rollout, as opposed to going to a system-wide rollout plan compressed into even if I were to be given the money today and told, okay, here's the money, go order the equipment, it's going to take a minimum of 50 weeks or 52 weeks, a year, to just get the first shipment of fiber in. And the reason that's happening in the general marketplace is there's $65 billion of federal money chasing fiber purchases across the country. Given that reality, what we propose doing is carrying on a neighborhood rollouts on a smaller scale and in a as available kind of process. What we would do with that is basically do about 50 lane miles in about 3 years. And the cost for doing this would be about $1,250 a home. When we did our original pricing of a fiber plan presented back in 2019, I had positioned it at about $825. So the $400 increase you're seeing per home is one, because of the scale being reduced of the rollout itself, and also because of inflation that we have seen across everything that we consume and system penetration by 2030. The reason why I have chosen 57% is if, based on reading or readouts by experts on the federal funds that are coming into the national system at the current time to create broadband access throughout the country, that's the to at least aim at and plan for going forward. Now, the point to note here is when you compare this, so these are basically two seemingly contradictory processes. What we are proposing is, one, to keep the system operational by changing out the taps in the current existing framework, and two, to do fiber from the other end and do fiber to the home on a neighborhood by neighborhood basis. Now, the fiber upgraded areas do not need taps. There are no taps involved in that. There is no electricity involved in that system except at the consumer end and the head end. So there's no electricity involved in the process of getting the signal over to customers' homes. What we also recommend in conjunction with these, replace our existing cable TV system, and that would very much form part of this plan. And in conjunction with all this, this is a process we've already begun of rolling out fiber 100% across all new business park and residential developments. So some of those that have come up in the recent past include Mira Luna, Skyland Ridge, Bay Hill, Tanforan, and of course others to come. So that would increase our footprint in fiber and would become part of our planning process going forward. The replacement process itself, we're requesting $650,000. And then for the fiber equipment and limited additional labor, $4.25 million. This leads us to a working capital request to keep us moving forward at a pace and a trajectory where the system is both kept operational and there is some level of fiber upgrade going on within the limits of what's available in the general marketplace. This slide is part of what I presented to the council into an ISP or an internet service provider strategy. And within that, we propose providing 3 services that we currently provide to our customer base, which includes television in the form of streaming TV, internet access, and phone. And we have, as we suggested before, continue to adapt ourselves to a thick pipe and thin pipe strategy. What it refers to is basic big companies like Amazon or Apple or Google, if you will, for ownership of the last few inches of the customer entertainment experience. So coexistence is part of the plan. And in terms of specific strategies within our operational setup, our product strategy still remains the 3 that I mentioned in the previous slide. Pricing strategy, we don't do contracts and we don't have a plan to do contracts for customers going forward. We continue offering our services on an at-will basis. Our content acquisition strategy is now very heavily based on ratings back in November of 2019. This has informed several of our channel drop positions, which has actually helped in the financial repositioning of the enterprise. The solution is not complete, and we continue to deal with channel drops, which is more the case than and running as of today. Marketing, we continue to do limited rollouts of marketing campaigns. We've had some success with those, and they have added mostly on the internet side to new subscriber acquisitions. Technology strategy is effectiveness. And overall operations, our focus remains on reducing faults, and the bottom line here is the more fiber we roll out, the fewer the number of faults, the more of a reduction we have in current television subscriber bases, more of a reduction in faults. And that continues to be a focus going forward. So really no change from what we enunciated 3 years ago to today and moving forward on the business approach. Streaming television, and some of the high points of the new rate card that would come into play with streaming TV include, for the first time, we will be offers only tier and a sports and news tier, and finally an expanded basic package. This creates a whole new level of choice for a customer base and allows them to potentially move away from the old rate card we've had in place. This creates a couple of new price points in between. And the new price points that we propose having in place would range from $35 for basic television service all the way up to $100, a little over $100 for everything we have on offer. And what's new about the proposed streaming TV offers compared to what we have in play today is they would include some of the movie channels that we currently sell as premium pay offerings over and above our expanded basic service. So in today's rate card environment in our enterprise, if you wanted to buy HBO or Showtime, you'd have to pay a separate price for it. In this new offering that we have and that's proposed, while HBO is not a part of that offering, we do include Showtime, Stars, Encore, all those movie services are all part of the big package we have coming into play. We think it will drive some interest. It may not be comprehensive in replacing every one of our current cable TV subscribers, but it might generate enough interest amongst our viewers, especially since they can access this new streaming set of packages on Apple devices, on Android devices, on Amazon, devices as well as Roku. We do not envisage any change in the low-income television and internet offerings. So we would propose keeping that in place pretty much at the price point we currently have in place. And this would fulfill our service charter to the community itself. So this is some sample marketing materials on what we have currently in development for the launch of the streaming TV service. We call this SB CityNet TV prior to launching it into a test phase. Again, some of the materials that we have in development for their first introduction to streaming TV. And this finally is results from this campaign. Now, there has been some talk and some discussions around expanding outside San Bruno. We have explored federal and state government grants. At the current time, the federal grants are primarily, they're very large in scope and in amounts. There's a total amount of $65 billion approved for federal provisioning of internet access. But they are currently focused in their current grant-making phase on those areas that are completely unserved or have broadband internet service that's below 25 megabits per second downstream and 3 megabits on the upstream side. We unfortunately do not fall within the category because of our level of service. We have a 310, so we have 300 Mbps minimum downstream and 10 Mbps minimum upstream available to our customer base, so we don't qualify for this round. But what I anticipate will happen over the next 24 plus months is the money will start trickling down to more of the already built out areas for upgrades. And the key to that, to some of that money being accessible to the likes of government, was to change the definition to have it available at a minimum of 100 Mbps downstream and upstream. That would almost automatically translate to federal level. At the California state level, a lot of money again has been made available for fiber build-outs, but they're currently focused on middle mile network build-outs across the state and not on services to the home. Their middle mile networks are what connect different areas of the state to each other and not so much homes within a particular area. So the opportunity may emerge in the next 24 to 36 months and onwards for some grant application efforts from our side to process grant applications and seek funds as they become available from federal and state sources. Regarding cities that are exploring city-owned fiber internet, we have made the pitch to provide white label services. We have not had some of the recent industry headlines as carried in the general press and with some implications for us. The first headline is, you hated your cable package, your streaming services are bringing it back. So the implication is pretty simple, that they're diminished. It's certainly down, but it's not gone. It's still there. And there's some ability to capture that through streaming. Now, streaming tops cable TV viewing for the first time. So basically that goes more in the same direction. Comcast, this is a more recent headline, which is sort of a pullback from the COVID era surge towards broadband subscriptions on cable systems. Comcast fails to gain broadband subscribers for the first time. Some level of a pullback is happening. It's still not significant. So this has a bit of an implication in terms of why would they bother acquiring physical infrastructures and cable systems if they have a way to enter the customer's home through the television set itself and their own branded smart TVs, which presumably would carry their own branded content. The last is Americans aged 50 and up are powering streaming growth, which is pretty relevant to us given the age and general disposition of our pay TV in time, we're probably in a good place. That brings me to the end of this set of slides. I'll be happy to answer any comments or questions.
Thank you for your presentation.
As we turn this back to the city council for questions, I just want to, I know that there has been a robust amount of presentation. Overall, I think the high-level conclusion are many cities that are looking into broadband are prioritized not have fiber across the full plant, though. We are unique, and it comes down to is if we stay in the business, it requires investment. And city being a smart city and all of the connectedness to, it is nothing short of amazing what they have done to shift the margins and that improvement by 77%. And one of the things we didn't talk about, one of the things that this city was able to do is to actually, during the heart of the pandemic, not cut off services. To work with some of our community partners and offer any household in San Bruno public benefits of being in the broadband business, which is, as we noted, becoming more of your team here is committed to doing the necessary.
As was stated, there's a lot of information. So this will be on, again, there's probably a lot of not wish to speak, so they're not being held here so that to give them the courtesy since they were present this evening. And we appreciate your.
All right, thank you. I'm given detail on the internet and telecom services that the city itself uses. How much does the city pay back to the enterprise?
As he comes forward to answer that question, know that we charge ourselves the wholesale rate, not a market rate. And so
CityNet receives $2,100 a month for wholesale internet connectivity, and for telephones.
That CityNet has to bear to provide those services?
There is no markup attached to it at all. It's just a pass-through.
So for every dollar that we
there's no retail component to the charge at all.
If I can,
City Manager.
Councilmember Hamilton, I think part of your question is what benefit on a sort of annual basis do we receive for the services that CityNet provides to the city? And so the director quoted paying that on the open market, that would be quite a bit more. And we estimate instead of $2,100, over $10,000 that we would have to pay per month for internet. And so there is a benefit of, at that estimate, $8,000 a month that the city enjoys because we are paying wholesale rates versus market rates. And so the same thing is true for telephone services because CityNet as an enterprise provides and sells VoIP internet services. We, the city as an entity, pay wholesale rates, not market rates. And so the implication is if we did not have CityNet, we would have to go out to the open market and pay market rate for basic sort of organizational services.
Try to figure out, if there's any significant portion of the $17.8 million deficit that we have in the enterprise fund, would that, how much of that could have been recouped by, having more realistic charges over the past, 10 years or however long we've been doing this practice?
Sure. I think we can provide an analysis of market rates like we would pay any other provider for those services. How much more money would CityNet have received, thus how much that number would have been reduced by?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think, full market rate is not seeing that doing that analysis and seeing what that $17.8 million number would look like otherwise is really going to be key for me to consider further investment, because that number is scary. So this was touched on a little bit, but if we make these investments to get CityNet back to a position to be competitive and relevant, how do we stay there? How can we compete in terms of services offered, especially with the user experience, the experience that the customer gets when they turn on their TV and the services that are available to them through their remote, how do we stay competitive with other providers as new technologies will continue to emerge as we move into the future?
Well, the launch of streaming TV would sort of at least get us up to the current state of what's evolving in the space. And it's all evolving at multiple levels at a rapid pace. So one way of looking at it is to have a fairly robust audit of those services going on all the time from the enterprise's point of view, with a view to importing those services if they're sufficiently low cost or make some kind of economic sense. At least partly owed to technological, shall we say, not being at the cutting edge, is we keep ourselves at about 30% below the current prevailing market rate, the prevailing rack rate. And we have taken care to keep it that way for a while, both to actually provide a good service to our customer base itself, and also to keep our customer base engaged with us going forward. Will that always be possible once we make the investment? It may be possible to be lower, but not necessarily 30% lower, maybe relatively lower to other providers.
When CityNet returns to profitability, we're going to have to ensure that part of those profits stay within the enterprise, because our user is in that user experience. And so when you look at the long arc of the 51-year enterprise, there were more years where the enterprise was making money than losing money. But we know the long history of that is as the parent company, when CityNet made San Bruno as the parent company of CityNet. But what it also meant is when the enterprise needed capital investments, that money wasn't there. And so part of the business plan of CityNet has to be the money to invest, because that will always happen.
And just to add to that, the enterprise historically has had a very proud history of being at the cutting edge of the. Apparently, the enterprise was the first entity in the Bay Area to launch digital television services and to go all digital when they actually did. And so the city prided itself on providing the most cutting edge services to its customer base. And the effort would be to get back to some.
I mean, I was here when San Bruno Cable was inaugurated, and you know, you're right. I mean, especially you know, for the first long period of its existence, absolutely it was cutting edge. And as a kid, that right over the past decade we're falling behind, and we need to figure out how to catch up. So we talked about grants, and thank you for bringing up that, because obviously we hear lots about all the infrastructure bills and all this money that's available, but it would make sense that the lion's share of that, at least now, would be going to manage to run fiber, at least partially through their cities, using transportation grants. Because you can use a transportation grant to run fiber to your streetlights, and that same backbone can be then used as for customers. So you can do a significant portion of the runs, or at least get some funding from transportation there. So that, especially with so much infrastructure money out there, that's something I would at least want us to explore. My last question, on slide 34, you talked about city-owned fiber and used Palo Alto, Colma, and EPA as examples. Were those listed as examples because they want to partner with us, or are they going off and doing their own thing?
Sure. Of those cities, the entity that is moving forward is Palo Alto. And that is because, to allocate it and move forward, and so they're seriously looking at it. We have had preliminary conversations with city staff, and do intend to talk to city staff and frankly develop a pitch, because one of the reasons you may remember that provides it, we intend funding that infrastructure costs, right? And so in our area, Palo Alto is the one moving forward. We have had to be the backbone servicer, and should we be able to do that and defray some of our overhead costs, that's a plus. but
Councilmember Medina.
I was still thinking of what to say, because this is a long get out of the business. And we're trying, but we don't have the revenue to expand. So I'll start with the slides. Slide 11, where it says there were some fiber rollouts planned and to be executed by CityNet, where 12 for the unanswered calls. Is there a voicemail option available where somebody calls and they're waiting? What defines an unanswered call, and is there a voicemail option? And I'm not sure if I should pause and let these questions be answered, Mr. Mayor. What would be the best way?
So going to your first question, which neighborhoods are on the list? We have Spyglass and Shadowcliff to follow in terms of planning. And the gentleman at the back here that is actually doing the work to Bay Vista. We have an opportunity there. And then we do have the water pipes in Florida Park, but we still are talking through what to do with those pipes. So it's somewhere in the list, but not quite defined yet, just don't come to mind. But there is a growing list.
Right, and so in 2022, we had a plan, a rollout plan, 7 different areas, $12.2 million to do all that in 2 years. So that's significantly different.
Yes, that called for 100% rollout of the system. 24 also called for a much lower pricing of fiber. What we have seen right now is the current pricing as put together by the consultants, and their number is 18.4 million, accounting for inflation and COVID and the supply chain. The other point I made earlier was the supply chain, given where it's at with chipsets and with fiber itself, not being easily available. Even if we were to get that money today, there's no way we could see material start being delivered to us in less than a year.
So things have drastically changed since.
They've drastically changed. Much of the supplies were incidentally being made in China, and that situation has shifted with the logistical logjams that developed during COVID, and then.
Member Medina, you're absolutely right. When we first developed the fiber to the home plan, we hadn't executed on a few of the pilot projects that now are installed and going well, as you saw in the presentation. The consultant pegs the number at 18 million. We certainly know it's no longer 13 million, and we do believe that if we were to do it with staff, we know it's no longer 13 million, but we do believe if staff is recommending is no longer to begin with the full allocation for the entire amount, but instead to continue with a phased implementation. And part of that is a shift in how we're talking about it, to no longer say, let's begin the fiber to the home plan, because the reality is San Bruno started the fiber to the home plan a number of years ago. And even during the pandemic, we did pilot projects in little neighborhoods. And so the recommendation that staff made is to aggressive, right? And allocate more money to do more upfront. What staff is really recommending is a hybrid model where we continue to do tap replacement and sort of slowly chip away at fibering to the home. Now that it's important enough to have a great internet experience. In fact, fiber is needed in the future for that wonderful internet experience as the bandwidth that people consume increases, but it's actually really needed to underpin and improve the backbone of our system, right? And so the hybrid approach does work for us, because if we do a combination tap replacement and a slow fiber build, we can still have a network and a system that can survive until we are fully fiber built out, but do it in a phased fashion, frankly, to not have to have that full allocation up front, and respecting the supply chain items that the director mentioned.
I appreciate that, and that helps for our audience as well, I'm sure. So I've noticed that fiber has been installed in installations. Are they open to leasing these lines? Are they a competitor? They're in our streets, right? And what do we know about?
I would not call them direct competition for the most part. Much of the fiber installs, and I'm equally curious when I see them laying it out. I literally walk around and kind of poke around, try and find out what they're doing, as is our staff. Our understanding at this point is a lot of it is backhaul for 5G. So signals that they are touting through their 5G service, the real workhorse of 5G is fiber.
Got it.
So that's what most of the fiber is for.
Okay, so shouldn't we be contacting them to find out if they would be able to lease part of that fiber to put in?
Crown Castle, I've had one discussion, it didn't go very far because they're doing it on behalf of the cell phone companies. And they need.
So the city manager did bring up in the past about expanding into other cities and offering CityNet services. And I think at one point it was Pacifica was mentioned, and then there was a discussion or some commentary on I guess a spine from the county and how possibly we could have tapped more expensive. There's been progress, and it's just like, at this point, where are we going to go next, right? And that's what we're here for. So if we can hear a little bit about those options.
Sure. Why don't I start and toss it to the director? So, this year I am the chair of the County Managers Association, and council knows that, we meet regularly, and actually, the last year, we provided a presentation to all the county managers, and there was significant interest and significant conversations with people who want to be in the broadband business. The challenge is that upfront investment, especially when you're beginning from ground zero. The director can mention South San Francisco because they hired a company to.
They hired a consulting company, something like JSI. It's called Magellan. And they specialize in these kinds of studies to do a scoping study for them. And those people came out with a $76 million build plan, fiber build plan. The city at that time chose to retreat and just went for public Wi-Fi in a few locations.
Can I ask a follow-up? You mind?
Yeah, well, if it's.
Go ahead.
Because it's directly on this.
Oh, I understand that. But
Sure.
I just wanted to, and city manager can correct me, but I think not only did you do the county managers, I think there was also, it was a time ago, but you also spoke, if my memory is correct, at the Council of Cities, and also made the presentation, which are the elected persons as well, if I'm not.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you have reached out and tried to broaden that.
Absolutely. We've reached out. There is a multi-jurisdictional fiber network that runs along El Camino and passes 8 cities. And that does provide some ability to expand and provide the CityNet signal, if not as a direct service, as a backup internet service. But we will still be facing the core issue with our city enterprise of needing to invest in fiber. So great conversations, and hopefully, some of them pan out, but we would still have the localized investment question.
Councilmember Medina said he was more than happy to yield.
So just, I think I know the answer, but I just want to be sure. So, we're not eligible for grants because the cities that we're talking about, any of our neighbors would fall into that category. So in other words, none of those folks would be able to go and get these infrastructure funds to be able to do the.
Not at this point in time would be my.
That is very true, with the only caveat that we do have very rural. There are other hurdles there, but in general, there are topography, geography, et cetera.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Medina.
Thank you.
And when somebody and those are my 2 questions.
Okay, a free student being service plan, which is you sign up today, your first 2 months are frequent. We and the water department have a good relationship every now and then for a little bit till such time we fetch up and do it again. So it's more to us to keep that supplied.
I'm good for now. Thank you.
City Manager?
But Councilmember Medina, I'll just totally agree with you that you've already thought about all your utilities, in our marketing efforts, so when a new resident comes in, they know about CityNet and we're top.
Just want to make sure. Councilmember Salazar, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I wanted to start, we were able to continue operations during the pandemic. And I know a lot of people, for a lot of different reasons, either they were working from home or they were attending classes from home. And I wanted to offer, my thanks to everybody who, put on the masks and that's, the kind of ingenuity and I also wanted to thank everyone who participated, all the different scenarios, all the different situations that were included in there. Definitely very helpful as we move forward in making this extremely germane to this conversation, but since it was presented, I did have a question on the call volume. When we say cable in that context, does that mean coax?
Don't necessarily gel together. It's hybrid fiber coax and fiber or cable.
To the media that was being used to transmit whatever type of signal, whether it was internet or television. The slide said about 50 miles of fiber that we've deployed citywide.
Well, the goal is to do 50.
Beta areas, we'll call them, and then what we're continuing to do.
It's underground, and we got a piece of the conduit.
To do.
It's cost effective, and it's generally the best type of
reliable than if it's aerial.
Yes.
Okay, but I know that one of what we're saying is
access to those poles. Of course, we're going to use them, but we do have.
1 second. Sorry, my computer's falling asleep here. You spoke a little bit about that, but do we have, besides which neighborhoods would get fiber first?
I think some of it is becoming a case of self-selection because of the priority list for fiber, because then we would have just invested the time and the money to. So, of necessity, I think as we start replacing taps across neighborhoods, they would, and there's no other specific criteria. I mean, we don't want to say.
And it's certainly the potential for success in a multifamily unit is far higher than the expense. And
COVID for us was, we discovered that there was a design and fragile piece of equipment called a connector, which was inside people's homes that was easy to break. So those were the people we unfortunately lost in the early stages of the COVID thing, and this is the learning we've kept in place. Now,
I think that was it for me. Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you.
Vice Mayor Mason.
Thank you. So exciting. I guess my first question is just around the paving project. We are finally seeing, I believe it's about $6 million being invested in the repaving of our streets. So should we move forward with investing in fiber, how can we align the placing of conduits with the pavement project?
Sure. Vice Mayor Mason, very good point. And so we will talk to the Public Works Department about that. And because our paving projects aren't that when we're ripping up the streets to the extent that it's cost effective that we install conduit. But certainly as we're doing road projects, we can look to start paving streets, and to the extent that we're going to slurry seal, a grind and overlay, and we're not going down to the depth where we would be digging up and putting in conduit, and so conduit.
I think you froze a little bit, so I'm not sure if you can hear me. Can you hear me right now?
Yes, we can.
Yes. Okay, thank you. So I guess that would be my first question and comment would be to try to align those as much as possible so that we're not spending the money twice. My other question is around next steps. So this was a very thorough presentation. It is a study session. What would the next steps look like and the timeline for those next steps?
City Manager.
Sure. I think we are fortunate that we're sitting here at a point where the city has received significant. It's around that time where we should interject this conversation, council, and have this be talked about with those other large investments that doing. And so I do imagine that would be the time frame, executable plan, that the investments and infrastructure that the city council will be discussing.
Thank you. I just want to make sure I saw the slide right. It was at the beginning of the presentation, and this was, I believe that we went from a loss of $1 3 years ago to 25 cents today, and I just wanted to know if that was accurate, and was that per account, or what was that comparison?
That was across the expenses and the revenues recorded for the enterprise from 2018-19 through to this year's projection, if you will. So basically what it amounts to is a 77% than we have lost before, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's incredible. Thank you. Thank you for that. So the next part is just a statement that I just wanted to make regarding CityNet. We've waited a long time for this presentation, and I really want to thank staff for this report. I also want to thank staff on the ground for the work they've done over the past 3 years to lessen losses, as was just repeated a moment ago. It's important to start with the great benefit that CityNet brings to San Bruno, not only to our day-to-day users of cable and internet, but to those who were able to serve in the midst of an international pandemic. Within an incredibly short period of time, we were able to work with local schools to provide internet at no cost to low-income households. We are able to offer a benefit to businesses that come into a city that other cities cannot offer. We are able to provide excellent customer service. Let me tell you a story of what happened a few months ago now. Our internet at home was not working. It was frustrating after hours. So we got sent to a call center where we waited for quite some time. And the next morning, the issue had not been resolved. My husband drove down because we're only a couple blocks away, because CityNet is local, came back, and the issue was fixed within the hour. Let me tell you, that has been our experience with our local CityNet office every single time we've gone to the front desk and every time we've spoken with a local representative. Local customer service is unheard of, as is a municipal cable company. Let's also talk about the benefit of CityNet providing Channel 1, in which local announcements are looped for all to see every day. This includes upcoming meetings, repeats of meetings, and upcoming community events. Local documentaries are showcased, and locals, instead of actors, are the reason to watch. Plus, pre-Zoom life, and still today, our CityNet team is able to professionally record our meetings as needed, where needed, which is important since San Bruno City Council doesn't have a city council chamber. This requires the setting up of equipment and taking it down before and after every single meeting. Just as important, let's talk about the potential for CityNet. There are a lot of individuals who have been disillusioned by CityNet over the years. The city has not invested in over 10 years, but expected the same returns it got 20 years ago. We also talk about debt, but don't talk about the amount the city took, as allowed, from CityNet's profits for decades before the city stopped investing in itself. As we saw in the presentation, those businesses that have invested in their companies, those that invested in fiber, receive significant returns. We cannot expect returns without investment. First, fiber is a must. Second, we need a business plan to make this a reality that includes the expansion of fiber, not just in San Bruno, but also to borders outside of San Bruno. Further, with the master pavement plan currently moving forward, we need to align our goals of placing fiber conduits with the paving currently happening, so that we don't get double charged to redig up the same pavement. How likely is it that we can offer Wi-Fi throughout our downtown for visitors who want to come and hang out, use and patronize our local businesses? What's the potential here, and how long will it take to get this plan? Because time, as of now, is not on our side. Third, we need to consider the staffing benefits. Our city's investment would provide an opportunity to maintain our current employees and potentially expand the department as needed, providing good and local union jobs. CityNet is a unicorn in comparable local governments. It deserves our prudent investment and long-term vision. It also deserves to be thanked for its help to San Bruno for all those years before we stopped investing in the enterprise. It too has a history here in San Bruno, and with the appropriate investment has a bright future as well. Thank you to all of our residents who have stayed loyal to our local enterprise. By supporting local, you have supported members of our community and their families. And thank you to our CityNet team and our director who continue to work day in and day out to maintain our local gem. I will no longer be on the city council when this decision is made, but it is important to me to let the public, staff, and my fellow colleagues know that I am #Team Bruno, #Team CityNet all the way, and look forward to seeing this enterprise be self-sustainable and profitable with a proper investment. Thank you all for your time tonight.
Thank you.
All right. I just was noticing it is 9:30, so before I go, I want to see if there's any members of the public that are on Zoom that wanted to speak on this topic. And I'll finish up.
We have one hand up on Zoom under the name Owner. Owner, whenever you're ready, you may begin.
Okay, can you hear me?
Owner, can you hear us?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
You can hear me? All right. This is Jim Evangelist, 105 DeSoto Way, San Bruno. And I just want to say what a great report was given tonight by both our staff and the consultant. And I would like to refer to page 19 of the initial report titled Find Conclusions and Recommendations, bullet point 3. It states, ask the council to examine the importance of remaining a service provider to the city residents related to ensuring a level of service that would be unavailable. I think that this is what the whole thing is. This is a very important utility in modern times. We are in the driver's seat here. We just have the will, the political will, and the vision to have this continue to move forward. Page 10 from the study session report says it all. This city asset is still viable financially about the needs of the residents moving forward. The 4 locations that have already been fiberized, if you will, have proven to be a successful experiment, further reinforcing a commitment to move forward with fiber to the rest of the city. Don't forget all the businesses and residents that will be moving into San Bruno with the new developments coming forward, and they will be proud members of a city-owned asset. As council members, don't you have the faith that residents will be moving, that residents of this city would prefer to give their money to their city-owned net department instead of to an impersonal out-of-town corporation? Finally, remember this city is not just this decision is not just financial, but moral as well. There are 19 employees working very hard on my net system who have been victimized by the circumstances not of their own making. Fiber to the premises is the correct decision for this, not only for the immediate needs of its current residents, but for building a common, literal link to the city's future residents. Current council members might not have experienced San Bruno Cable when it brought local sports to Channel 1. It will do so again if you decide to make the tough decision to bring fiber to the rest of the San Bruno residents. I think this is really a positive move to make. So good luck, and
please finance this move. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next speaker, please.
I do not see any other hands raised.
Okay, thank you. But due to the hour, I wanted to make sure we got folks in.
Mr. Mayor?
Oh, yes.
Could somebody try to contact the last caller and let him know, like, there was no way that we could understand all of it? We were missing every other couple words, if it was possible.
Well, I think the person was, if on the line, is probably hearing us say that.
Okay. So-
I would say what I got from it was a very positive attribute about being local, was about the employees and what they bring to the service level. It was a positive attribute to having local. But Councilmember Medina is absolutely right. We were not being work. If you would like to put that in further writing or documentation, that can repeat everything everybody said, but brought up about the phone information. So my experience has been effective. What I do notice is if it's on the weekend or something, I can tell you in the last week or two, it goes to another place. It was not a storm or anything like that, but I think those would be helpful to improve that if that is possible. Nothing is perfect, and I get that, and everybody waits. You know, I remember when the building was dedicated, I was there. I remember the gentleman that it's dedicated for. We used to /CityNet services to the city, and it was giving back to the community who came out to those baseball games, into the football games, into the graduating. That was very attractive. Granted, time moves on, and service was upgraded, which was due, and it always is due. And back then, because of the way it was set up here, is that when we purchased items, that there should be an equipment reserve, as we do for other departments back then, was to help defray costs. Profitable business that the City of San Bruno's general fund would receive before my time. Bring that down to zero, if my memory's correct, to slowly kind of, we'll say, funds set aside, so when we have these upgrades or these necessities with the equipment which goes out, it needs to be up. Being independent, we have been able to market ourselves in a Shelter Creek as an example where I think, you know, if we can continue to have services, which we do, and for education and hotspots that we did, I think there's a lot of, most folks would say too, whatever assets we have in our personal lives, something, and I think the city manager said it well when he said it's a lot of information. We're not myself, is that I had an old boss that used to say, you know, if you ever said to him, well, I hope we can do better. Aligned, dedicated plan in place, resources that may, as I have a lot of pride, as Councilmember Hamilton said, data and a plan, and that's critical to me. I share with the extra step. And I know during COVID, they found, and I know firsthand. So I want to thank them as well. I don't ever want that department to feel that we've come through and still providing that service. And I think Councilmember Salazar is correct. But I do say that I appreciate the robust report, the detailed information, the staff that they've forward to that detail. I do look forward to the next steps, and I do look forward to a plan that shows the investment is a...
No, thank you.
Thank you. Council, thank you for the questions. Thank you for being here. Thank you, staff.